Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-foamed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, and glad you're joining me today. And what do we have in store for you today? Well, of course, we're going to come at you with our usual homestead updates, and we're going to bring some homesteading relevant news to you. Of course, I'll always talk a little bit about the Front Porch Facebook group, and our main topic of discussion today is going to be raising Coturnix Quail on the homestead. And, of course, we'll have some recommendations for you and all that good jazz, too. So I think we got a great episode for you today. Let's just jump right off with some homestead updates. What have I been doing the last couple of weeks? Well, I was sick for about, almost 2 weeks. And I really just got over it. Had a horrible cough and everything, but still had a lot of stuff that I had to do. Been kind of put off pruning the fruit trees a little bit long, but I finally got that done a couple of weeks ago. And as a matter of fact, today I went out and I have a chipper shredder, and I was running all the limbs through that, making some mulch. I had to run a new wire to the greenhouse. Here's a little public service announcement for you folks. Check extension cords. I had when I first put the greenhouse in, I didn't actually run a hard wire to it. I just ran an extension cord to it. It was a good heavy duty outdoor extension cord. It's kind of an expensive one, but it's been out there a year and a half or so in the weather, and I had it plugged in up. We have an outlet at our deck, and I had it plugged in there. And I went out a couple weeks ago, or I guess it was about a week and a half ago, and went to flip the lights on in the greenhouse, and they didn't come on. And so I just started looking around to see what the problem was. And I actually had a couple rabbits in there just kind of messing around, hopping around, messing up things in the greenhouse because that's what they do. And I was worried one of them chewed a wire or something. But I knew I didn't really have any wires that low to the ground, so I was kind of looking around. But then I started following the extension cord that I had running to the greenhouse. And I got up next to the house, and I looked at the outlet, and that plug on that extension cord had actually got hot and melted. And I was like, whoa, right up against my house too. So I was kind of nervous about that. And, I decided to get some good, heavy wire and just, hardwire the greenhouse in and do it right and get rid of that extension cord stuff. So you keep an eye on those extension cords, folks, when you have them outside. Evidently that one just got weathered. It was a good heavy duty extension cord, but they're only good for so long out there in that weather like that. And it was a little hard on it. And evidently it wore on it. So, boy, that could have been a disaster there, being right up against the house like that. Never kicked a breaker or anything, so that concerned me a little bit. Let's see, what else? Oh, check for the birds you want at Rural King and Tractor Supply. Our Rural King had a sign up, and it said that if you don't see the kind of birds you want, let us know. Maybe we can order them. So I just, out of curiosity, I asked them if they had Coturnix Quail or if they could get Coturnix Quail. And the lady said yes, but you'd have to order 25 of them. And that was ours. I don't know if all of them could do that, but check with them. I'm going to be talking about Coturnix Quail today, and I was curious about that. So you might want to check and see if that's a place where you can get them. 25 isn't a lot of Coturnix Quail. They don't take up a lot of space, as we'll talk a little bit about today. So you might want to look into that if you get a chance. What else? I don't know. Just regular stuff going on around here. Made a lot of changes to the Homestead Forum membership community. I've been working a lot in there and doing podcasting for that, and weekly live videos and some other videos. So a lot going on in there. I'll talk more about that at the end of the episode. How about some homestead relevant news? I ran across this article from all places, the Chicago Tribune, and the title was, "At Growing Libraries, Patrons Collect Seeds to Grow Fruits, Vegetables, and Flowers." Now, I like this because a lot of libraries are going to this, and I'm talking about public libraries, your book libraries. They actually have seed libraries. A lot of them are doing this, and our local library is doing this as well, where you can go in and check out seeds. And this article's about that going on in Chicago. and really good stuff. Talk a little bit about what was offered there and how it works, and just exactly what you can do and how many seeds you can get. And I thought it was a really interesting article, and I just love seeing some awareness being brought to this, because it really opens the door up for a lot of people to start doing some gardening. And I like this too. It even talked about, said, surrounding their library is a food forest community garden with apple, apricot, and peach trees, as well as perennial herbs, including mint, chives, and fennel, which will emerge from the soil later in the spring. I thought that was just pretty wild. And it says the community is invited to harvest the produce when it's ready, the person at the library said. So I think that's just fascinating. There's some really cool stuff going on out there in the communities. You know what? You can't use the excuse that I can't afford seeds in most places, because now you can go to your public library and get some seeds. And I think that's pretty awesome. So take advantage of that if you get a chance, because, the more people take advantage of that, the more libraries will do it and want to partake in that and offer that, and it'll make it available for a lot more people. I wonder how many people are actually taking advantage of it. I know I've never participated in the one at my local library. I did go up there and check it out when I first got a flyer about it. I thought it was kind of interesting. I just went there and looked at it, but I didn't get anything from it. But I should go up there and look and see if there's anything I'm not growing there that perhaps they have some seeds I could get, maybe something more rare or something different. But I think it's pretty cool. So you can check out that article. I'll have a link to that in today's show notes. Today's show notes, by the way, can be found at smalltownhomestead.com/79 if you want to check out all the notes and the links and stuff I have for today. So what's happening at the Homestead Front Porch? Lots of great things going on there. If you don't know what the Homestead Front Porch is, it's our Facebook group. It's a closed group, but all you have to do to join is ask, and we'll get you right in there. We do ask you a couple questions when you sign up to join. Answer yes to those, we'll get you right in. And I'll tell you what, it's a great bunch of people. There's a little over 20,000 people in that group now, and it's hopping, and there's just all kinds of great advice flying around in there. So come be a part of the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group if you're not. It's just we have a good time in there. Lots of knowledgeable folks in there. Lots of newbies in there too, learning, asking great questions. So come be a part of that. Don't let anything keep you out of there. It's a great place to hang out. Okay, our main topic of discussion today. A lot of people have requested this, wanted me to talk about this, and I've been kind of putting it off for a while, and I don't even really know why. I guess I wanted to have a little time under my belt raising Coturnix quail. I started raising them, it's been maybe a year and a half ago I started raising Coturnix quail, and I'll tell you, I love them. I absolutely love raising quail. And some of the great things about raising Coturnix quail, one of the things, are very low maintenance. I'm surprised at how easy they are to raise. I mean, the rabbits actually take way more care than the quail do. They take up very little space. I think that's another really big plus to raising Coturnix quail. Right now I'm raising them in cages. I want to talk about some different ways you can raise them later. I did actually have a bunch of them in my greenhouse for a while through the winter one time, and just let them run around in there and kick up the mulch on the floor, and they were loving that. But I ended up going to cages. I've got these the rabbit cages. They're these 30 by 30, pretty standard rabbit cages you would find at a Rural King or a TSC or some box store, 30-inch by 30-inch. And I put 5 quail. I put 1 rooster and 4 hens in each cage. That way I have fertilized eggs, and there seems to be plenty of room for those birds. I mean, they're completely happy. They run around, they play, they do things, they make messes, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. But it's just they take up very little space. So I think it's a great plus for them. They're a great bird for raising in small areas. If you're like in an urban homestead, maybe you have a area in a garage or a shed or something like that. Perfect animal for that. They're fairly quiet. They do make a noise, especially the roosters. They do make a fairly strange noise, but the bonus is nobody really knows what that noise is. It sounds like some kind of wild bird to a lot of people. They don't really identify the noise. So it's not something that's probably going to get you a lot of attention paid to you. And if you have a lot of roosters, I mean, it could get pretty noisy. I keep about, 5 to 8 roosters at about all times, and it's not that bad. It's really not that loud. So, they do make a little bit of noise, but they're fairly quiet. They really are. I think they are an absolutely great tasting meat and a great tasting egg. I like them better than chicken, better than rabbit. Granted, you don't get as much per bird. Obviously, they're a small bird, so you need a lot of them to make a decent amount of meat in the freezer. But very good tasting, excellent meat. The eggs, same way, very small, but very rich, extremely tasty eggs. I love them so much better than a chicken egg. I really do. Very good. These birds are extremely easy to process. One of the things I really, really love about quail, besides them just being easy to process, is that there's not really a connection there. With rabbits, it's kind of easy to get an attachment to rabbits. It really is. You raise them for a while, and they're just these fluffy, furry, I don't know. They're just, it's a little easier to get attached to a rabbit. And for some people, especially, it's really hard to kill a rabbit. Some people could never process a rabbit just because they can't kill them. I don't have that problem at all with quail. There's really not a lot of personality there. And real easy to process. I'm telling you, when I'm processing these birds, I use a pair of meat shears, and that's it. I don't use a knife. I just do the rest with my hand. You can actually I skin them. So, I take the head off, and then I just peel off the skin. And then you pull it down and cut off the legs and use your fingers to do the rest, and you just tear it right off of them real easy. And it's I can really process one in probably less than a minute. It's that quick and that easy. Definitely less than a minute. So yeah, real easy to process. Again, less attachment issues. I think that's a huge bonus with these animals. So a lot of bonuses with raising Coturnix quail. I do think there's a couple drawbacks though. They're an extremely messy bird. Their waste, they'll throw it. They'll throw their food. They'll dirty up their water. They're very messy birds. You can't have anything around them that's going to, you're going to try to keep clean, because they'll decorate it for you. Very messy. And the eggs are hard to work with. There's a thing called a quail egg cutter. It's a pair of scissors with a little point. It's got a circle on the end of it and a little point, and you slice it, and they'll take the top of the egg off. You got to have one of those. It just makes everything so much easier with these little eggs, because they're so hard to work with your fingers, that these quail egg cutters will just make it a lot easier. They are hard to work with though. It takes about 4 eggs to make a regular chicken egg. But they're fantastic eggs. But boy, hard boiling them and trying to peel them, that's a challenge. I did come across a little tip on that though. If you don't mind a little bit of a white vinegar taste, if you'll soak the eggs in like a quart jar filled with white vinegar and leave them in there for a few hours, you can peel. It basically takes the hard part of the shell off, the hard of the boiled egg, and it just leaves this like a rubbery film kind of on the egg, and that comes off real easy. So that's a good way to peel the eggs, and it's a lot easier and a lot better. But you do get a little bit of that white vinegar taste into the egg. It does soak into the egg just a little bit. It didn't really bother me, but for some people that might not be good. Some facts about raising quail. The egg incubation is 17 days. They reach full size in 6 to 7 weeks. That's about on the Coturnix quail, that's about a 10 to 12 ounce bird. And they start laying at 7 to 8 weeks. So basically at 8 weeks, you got a full-grown bird that's laying eggs. It's pretty awesome. It's a pretty fast turnaround. If you're just raising them for meat, that's a really quick turnaround. It's quicker than rabbit. Some people do butcher their rabbits at 8 weeks. I go about 12 to 14 weeks on mine because they're a little slower growing, but I feed them a little bit more naturally. I don't feed them, feed that's super high in protein. I give them more natural feeds and fodder and things like that, and forage, which does tend to grow them a little slower. But the quail, extremely fast growing. When you're incubating them, you're going to want to run your temperature between 99 and 100 degrees, and the humidity between 50 and 60%. They're going to do real well. They don't have a super high hatch rate. My experience on the hatch rates, probably around 60%. So it's a little low, but it's acceptable. I find it acceptable for what I'm doing. And when you're brooding quail, you want to keep them in the brooder until they're fully feathered. You want to kind of, it's similar to chickens. You want to decrease the brooder temperature by about 5 degrees a week to help them adjust. You want to feed them now I do go with a little cheaper feed from a feed store. once they're full grown. But when they're growing, I will feed them that Manna Pro Game Bird. It's that Game Bird Showbird feed that you get in the 5-pound bags, like TSC. And I'll feed them that until they're about 6 weeks old at least, before switching to a cheaper, lower protein feed, because they seem to grow really well on that, and it gives them a good boost right off the bat. Let's talk a little bit about the housing the quail, because this is what a lot of people are interested in. Is like, where do you keep them? And I've already told you I keep mine in cages, but I do think an aviary is a great place to keep them. If you've got the room and you've got some kind of a building you can do this with, building an aviary is a really good way to raise them. It's a large enclosure made for confining birds. And unlike cages, aviaries allow the birds a larger living space. They could fly around a little bit. Aviaries are often known as flight cages, because they fly around a little bit. And, also often aviaries will contain plants and shrubbery, and the birds love that. They'll fly into it and make nests under it, and, they'll kind of lay under it and do what birds do, they'll hide out in it, and there'll be a way more natural environment for them. But I do raise mine in cages, and I told you I use the 30-inch cages, and, I think the rule is one bird per square foot. On average, they're really comfortable with that. Some people do run them a little tighter than that, and they do pretty well. Now, they will start fighting if you get too many in a cage. They will. I have seen that when mine were real little, and I'd be growing them. I keep more in a cage at that point, and if you leave them in there a little too long, you'll see some fights, and they can be pretty brutal to each other. So you want to get them thinned out pretty quick. What other equipment are you going to need to raise quail? It's just about like raising chickens. You're going to need feeders, of course. There's the round ones or the long ones. A lot of people will actually design a feeder that hooks on the outside of a cage, and I've often thought about doing this because they are so messy, where they actually have to stick their head through a slot in the cage to get their head into the feeder. That way, they can't kind of sling their head back and forth. And throw the feed around because they are so bad about it. But I use little round feeders that I just kind of set in there, little round chicken feeders. And, I just have to stay on top of it and keep them cleaned up. And I kind of keep them back in one corner so not too many of them can, climb all over it and make a big mess on them. Of course, you're going to need a waterer. A lot of people use the automatic drinking cups for quail. And I don't, but I've seen people use them and they work really, really well. I use a regular water base, the round ones that you screw like a quart jar on or whatever. I use that, but they actually make one that's for quail. It's a little bit thinner around the edge. For when the ones for chickens are a little bit wider and hold a little bit more water at one time. But the ones for quail are quite a bit thinner, and you'll see those at your box stores as well. So they work really well. Again, you have to clean it a couple times a day. I'm usually morning and evening. I go out there and slosh it around, clean it, get some fresh water in it, because they are messy. They really are a messy bird. I also keep some small pans in there for dust baths. I actually just purchased some little pans at Walmart for like $1. They're just little metal pans, and they do love their dust baths. Let me tell you, they'll jump in there and make a bigger mess yet. So you've heard the theme here, right? Quail are messy. But I keep them in a place where it really just doesn't matter. I collect their waste underneath of them, and anything that hits the ground is then going into a compost pile. I mean, it's kind of wasteful. They do go through a little bit, but that is one of the bonuses of raising them in an aviary. If they sling their feet around, it's landing on the ground, and guess what? They're just going to eat it off the ground. That's their natural process anyway. And when I had them in the greenhouse, I noticed I didn't use half as much feed because that's what they would do. They'd sling it around out of the bowl, out of the feeder, but it just landed in the mulch, and then they would just pick through the mulch and you scratch around in it and pick it out. So they didn't need near as much feed. They didn't go through near as much. So I think aviaries are a great way to go. And if I had the room to do it, I would probably raise them that way. I really would. Let me talk a little bit about the quail eggs. Again, 3 to 4 quail eggs equal an average size chicken egg. I think it's closer to 4, definitely 4. And if they're given supplemental light, just like a chicken, Coturnix quail can lay 200 to 300 eggs per year. They do slow down in the wintertime without the supplemental light, but mine did pretty good. Even I just have a little bit of light coming in there, and they did really good. They kept laying through the winter when I had them in the winter. There's some great articles out there about the health benefits of quail eggs. Now, I included that link in the show notes, and I won't get a lot into it, except for to tell you that there is a lot of health benefits to quail eggs. And like I said, the link is in the show notes. You ought to go check it out if you're interested in the eggs, because there's a lot of benefits to quail eggs, and they are healthier than chicken eggs in a lot of ways. They have a lot of nutrition that chicken eggs don't even have. So definitely for the nutrition factor, quail eggs are worth getting. But I also think you do want to get a quail egg cutter if you're going to raise quail and eat the eggs, because those eggs are just near impossible to work with without it, and that makes it a lot better. Again, processing the quail, very, very easy. I'll include a link to a video also in the show notes of someone dispatching and processing a quail. I've never videoed myself doing it. It's, again, super easy process. There's nothing I've ever processed easier than a quail. I mean that, really, nothing. Extremely easy to process. If you've ever processed doves, like I used to do some dove hunting when I was younger, it's similar to that. It's very similar to that. So, I mean, if you've ever done that, then it's about like processing a quail, but extremely easy. So I just think there's so many benefits to raising quail. Great animal to raise, especially if you're in that urban environment. I think it could be the kind of bird you might want to raise instead of chickens. Do I think chickens are great? I absolutely do. Would I choose chickens over quail if I had to pick just one? Possibly. I'm in an urban environment, so quail work out better. But if it wasn't for that, I might go with chickens over quail, just because there are some other benefits. But for example, quail aren't near as good at doing work for you. And what I mean by that is like tearing down compost piles and things like that. Chickens will actually do labor for you. Coturnix quail do a little bit of that. They'll scratch around, throw some stuff around, but nothing like a chicken. Not anything like a chicken. So there's some benefits to chickens that quail don't have. And if you're looking for personality, Coturnix quail don't have a lot. They really don't. So, again, they have their benefits. They have a few drawbacks. Again, messy birds. When I first got them, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know. I actually had them in my garage at first. When I very first brought some home, I had them in my garage, and they were just, all around their cages, it was just a disaster. And I was like, wow, these are some messy little birds. It kind of reminded me, when I was a kid, my mom and dad raised a lot of exotic birds, and they would do a lot of parrots and things. Well, they bought this one bird called a myna bird, and the parrots and stuff weren't never too bad. We got this myna bird. This thing was horrible. This thing would make the biggest messes. It was like, it would try to see how far it could sling its crap and its food outside that cage. And it did do pretty good. It gets a pretty good distance, let me tell you. That's how Coturnix quail are to me. They are some messy little boogers. But if you got them in a place where that doesn't matter, like I do now, it doesn't matter. And I noticed when I had them in the greenhouse on mulch, they kept the mulch pretty stirred up and covered up their waste really well. I didn't even notice an issue in there because it was, a pretty good size area for the few birds I had. And I didn't even notice. That's why I think aviaries are a great way to go. So if you're considering another livestock for your homestead, I think Coturnix quail make a fantastic bird to have. And I think you should think about getting them. Again, you can check with your local feed store. They might be able to get them for you. If not, Craigslist is where I originally bought mine from a local person that had them. But you can order the eggs and hatch them yourself. You can actually order quail. They're pretty expensive to buy quail online. But I think when I bought mine, I got they were like 4-week-old birds when I originally got them. And I think I paid $1.50 or $2 a piece, something like that, for them. So it was a good start, and then after that point, you can start incubating your own eggs and keep them going. You're going to get a lot of eggs, so you can just take a few and throw them in there and hatch a few and keep the process going and continue to raise them. Today's recommendation it goes right along with this today. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes for a YouTube series. It's a playlist. And it's Jack Spirko's quail aviary build on YouTube. He actually built a quail aviary, and he documented it through a few videos, and there's a playlist the process of him building that. And I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. That's Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. If you've never heard of him or don't listen to that, this video series is really good. And it's something you should think about if you have the room and the time to build an aviary, because I think the quail are happier in that environment, and I think they're easier to raise in that environment. So you check out that aviary build. Now he's made some changes to that and actually turned it into a aquaponics garden with the quail in there since he done these videos, but still really good videos on how to build a quail aviary. So check them out, and I think you'll see that and think, wow, that's what I want to do, and it's what I'd like to do too if I had the room. But since I don't, I'm doing a few cages. And I tell you what, you can stack those cages, and that works really well too. Now that I raise them in cages now, I don't have the trays under those cages because they come with that plastic tray, because I just let it fall down into a compost pile where I'm vermicomposting. But when I had them in my garage, I actually had those catch pan trays underneath the cage. Well, they don't fill up that fast. It's really not that bad to do that. You will get some smell like that. I kept some wood chips in there to kind of soak things up, but you will get more smell from the trays. But I like to let it just fall right through the cage and into a compost pile, and then collect it up or use it for vermicomposting, or put it in another compost pile and then compost it thoroughly. But a lot of different ways you can do it. But aviary is a great way to do it too, with some mulch. So there we have it today, folks. I think that it was a quick and easy one. There's not a lot I can tell you about raising Coturnix quail other than it's easy. I mean, it really is. I haven't had any disease issues. I haven't had a lot of deaths. I think I've maybe lost 2 in a year and a half. And they're just sudden deaths that I don't even know what happened. So it just, I never really even knew what happened when they died. So it's not a bird with a lot of losses. It's easy to raise. Not a lot to it. Extremely easy livestock. And if you're looking for an easy one, I can't think of one any better. And as much as I love raising rabbits, they're a lot more work than Coturnix quail are. They really are. So there you have it, folks. Coturnix quail in a nutshell. Get you some if you have the room or the time or want to do it. Thank you all for listening to this podcast. Hey, I really appreciate those last week who jumped in and sent in a few audio clips to kind of help me get a podcast out last week, because I didn't want to go 2 weeks without one, and I was just kind of... It isn't that I felt really, really bad, but boy, I was having some coughing fits that were just unreal. It probably took me 3 hours to record a half-hour podcast. So I appreciate everybody that sent in an audio clip for last week's podcast episode. I really appreciate that. It really helped out. And hey, if you want more of the Modern Homesteading Podcast, or you just really like it, consider joining our Homestead Forum membership community. It's real inexpensive, and it helps us keep this thing going, and you get a lot of extra. It ain't just you giving me money. I used to take donations through Patreon, and there, people would give a little bit of money, and they didn't really get anything extra. Well, with this membership community, you get a lot extra. You get an extra podcast every week. You get a live discussion chat once a week. There's other videos in there. There's discounts from other businesses on homesteading related items. For an example, if you're looking to get some comfrey on your homestead, I mean, we're almost in that time of the year. Marsh Creek Farmstead is offering a 20% discount for members of that community. That right there, if you order enough comfrey, could pay for your membership. The membership is $2.99 a month, or $29 a year. Very affordable, and you get a lot of extra stuff, and there's more stuff going in every day. We have a forum where you can get in there and interact. We have a private Facebook group where you can interact in there. A lot of stuff going on. So I hope you'll come be a part of the Homestead Forum membership community, and it goes a long way to supporting this podcast and help us do more things better. Also, I appreciate those who've left an iTunes review or a review in other places. It means a lot to me. It really does, and I love seeing that. It's really encouraging, and I thank you for doing that. Again, the show notes for this episode can be found at smalltownhomestead.com/79. Thanks for joining me this week, folks. Happy homesteading, and God bless.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.